Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, friends of Japanese prints. I'm Dieter, and I'm the manager and owner of the Artelino company. And my little company, located in Bavaria, near the beautiful Bavarian Alps, sells Japanese prints in weekly online auctions, and we do this actually online since 2001. And we also produce these videos about Japanese prints. And today's video, it targets more beginners for Japanese prints. I want to give you a kind of short biography about a very, very important Japanese landscape artist. His name is Hasui Kawase, and he was the leading artist and designer in the genre of landscape prints of the so-called Shinhanga art movement of the first half of the 20th century. Let me make a citation by an author, a Japanese author. His name is Muneshige Narasaki. What he wrote in a book dedicated to Hasui. That book was written in the 1950s. And he wrote the following. Although Hasui is not well known in Japan, which is no longer true, by the way, he is famous abroad. Hokusai, Hiroshige, and Hasui are the three greatest woodblock print artists of Japan. Narasaki, Muneshige. Well, you see an image, a photograph of the artist when he was, well, maybe roughly 50, 60 years old. Hasui was born on May 18th in 1883 with the given name of Hasui Bunjiro in Tokyo. His family, they were small shopkeepers, and the young Hasui, as a child, he was of very fragile health. When he was 3 years old, he contracted meningitis. However, at school, he showed a lively interest in drawing, and his parents were okay to send him to an artist, even 2 or 3 different artists where he learned painting. And one of his teachers was Saburosuke Okada. From him he learned how to paint in Western style. The young Hasui wanted to become an artist, and there was a problem because his father had different ideas. He wanted his son to take over the family business. So the next years, the young Hasui, well, I see an old image, photograph of him when he was maybe, well, I don't know, 18 years old. Well, the next years he spent learning accounting, learning business administration, and fortunately also learning English. And the conflict with the family was finally solved. His sister, she married a shop assistant, a shop employee, and then his sister took over the business. So finally Hasui was free to become a professional artist. By then he was already 26 years old, and he wanted to join the painting school of a famous painter and printmaker with the name of Kiyokata Kaburagi. But Kiyokata Kaburagi rejected him. He thought he was too old at the age of 26. He tried again 2 years later. By then he was not much younger. By then he was 28 years old. But Kiyokata Kaburagi finally accepted him, and he soon recognized the talent of Hasui. And so one day he introduced him to Watanabe Shotsaburo. Watanabe Shotsaburo, a famous Tokyo publisher for Japanese prints. Well, here in the background you see a photograph of the publisher Watanabe Shotsaburo. Well, who was he? Let's wrap it up in one sentence. Well, he was the initiator and the driving commercial force of the so-called Shinhanga art movement, very important Japanese art movement of the first half of the 20th century. But let's start in his early years. Well, he began as an apprentice in an export business in Tokyo, and there he could establish contacts with clients in North America and in Europe. And already at a very very young age, I think he was only 18 or 19 years old, he established his own business. He established a print shop in Tokyo. And at the beginning, Watanabe produced mainly reproductions of old Japanese prints, also called ukiyo-e. And at that time, we should know, the old art of printmaking, as it was done by artists like Hiroshige, Utamaro, Kunisada, well, that was pretty much in trouble. It was commercially very much in decline because it had been replaced by photography and also by offset lithography. The artists who were still active in making woodblock prints, well, they had a tough time in making a living. Most worked as illustrators for newspapers or for magazines. But this young guy, Watanabe Shotsaburo, well, he had a vision. And his vision was to make a kind of a renaissance of the old art of Japanese woodblock printmaking by transforming it from a cheap product for the masses into a commercial product. Yeah? 19th century prints were not regarded as high art. From a commercial product to an exclusive art product for a few, but of course more expensive. A woodblock print in the 19th century, well, we know that from another artist of the 20th century, Tokoriki Tomikichiro, he once said, an old print, an old ukiyo-e, did cost as much as a bowl of rice. Of course, that was the commercial product, and Watanabe wanted to change that. Well, other ideas he had to renovate old Japanese printmaking was to accommodate, well, these new prints. And new prints, that's a translation of Shinhanga. Shinhanga means new prints, to accommodate them to the taste of Westerners. So to target mainly Westerners, Americans and Europeans for Shinhanga, not so much the Japanese actually. And the next factor was he wanted to keep the traditional teamwork of old Japanese printmaking, the teamwork of an artist who makes the design, of a carver who carves the blocks, of a printer who pulls the copies, and the publisher who is responsible for selling and who takes the financial risk. He wanted to keep that. And he wanted to modernize the aesthetics, of course. And they learned a lot from whom? From French Impressionism. And French Impressionists, they knew how to create moods by playing with the effects of light and shadow. An old print by Hiroshige, well, there are no shadows. You'll never see any shadows there, and not really wonderful prints, yeah, but a certain mood that you have the feeling, hey, this is now sunset and that is a rainy day, or this is snow and today it's very, very cold, yeah. Creating such moods with images, that was his idea, and that is a lot what Shinhanga and the art of Hasui Kawase is all about. So Watanabe had one problem. He was looking for artists who could realize his ideas, and he was in close contact with the painting school of Kiyokata Kaburagi, and like this, Hasui Kawase was introduced to Watanabe, and it was the beginning of a lifelong cooperation between Hasui and the publisher Watanabe, and also other artists like Ito Shinsoi, for instance. Also Ito Shinsoi had started at the painting school of Kiyokata Kaburagi. Between 1918 and 1923, Hasui produced more than 100 woodblock print designs for Watanabe. But then something very unexpected and something terrible happened. It happened on September 1st of 1923. It was the Great Kanto earthquake. It hit Tokyo and other areas of Japan, and it was one of the most devastating earthquakes that ever hit Japan. 140,000 people died due to the earthquake, and especially due to the fires that raged for 3 days. Watanabe's print shop was destroyed, and with it all the wooden blocks that they had stored inside the print shop, including Hasui's blocks. And also Hasui's private home was destroyed, and with it all the sketchbooks of Hasui were gone. Hasui had little luck in his private life. His private home, his residence, was destroyed a second time. Well, the second time in 1945 by the US bombers who dropped their bombs over Tokyo. Hasui was a short man with rather thick glasses. He had a bad eyesight, and in his manners and behavior he was rather conservative, could even say retrograde. He preferred to wear kimono over Western suit and liked to drink sake, well, Japanese wine. And Hasui never became a rich man as a printmaker. He often had to borrow money from his publishers, but he was proud. He said he could make a living by printmaking, and he considered himself the only printmaker who could live just from printmaking. All the other Shinhanga artists that you may know, like Ito Shinsui, for instance, they were often mainly painters and earned their money with paintings and with printmaking, and often the designs for a print, they were taken from one of their paintings. Hasui, the master of landscape prints. And I think I mentioned it before, he was especially good in night scenes, in snow scenes, and in rain scenes. And this is now the right moment to show you a few of his images. Well, an image says more than 1,000 words. Let's take a look at a few of his. Well, he concentrated very much on temples, on pagodas, on famous views, on tourist attractions. Let's take a look at the next one. You see Mount Fuji, of course, yeah, accommodating the romantic Western views of Japan. All Japanese print artists, also the contemporary ones, they all make designs with Mount Fuji. Next one. You see there, you can recognize very well how a mood, how an impression is created. Well, this looks like a little bit of rainy or misty or haze, or like it's going to start raining very soon. It's quite uncommon, and that is so typical for Hasui and typical for the Shinhanga art movement. Let's take a look at the next one. Well, this is not directly a night scene, it's in the morning, sailboats, sunrise, but it clearly creates a mood. Hasui never made any designs from photographs. He made sketches on the spot, so he had to travel a lot. And Hasui, I mentioned the concept of the Shinhanga teamwork before. Hasui never carved a block and he never printed. However, he was closely involved in the production process, and he supervised it, but he made only the sketch, colored the sketch, and when he came back from his travels, he handed the sketch over, most probably first to the publisher. He was a rather rigid man who had his own ideas, what could sell and what not, and then the carvers got the sketches and tried to turn it into a final product, and then the printer came. Hasui once said an interesting sentence. It goes like this. He said, some of my finished prints, they look better than my sketches, and sometimes it's the opposite. Interesting sentence. Hasui produced more than 600 woodblock prints during his lifetime. 600 woodblock prints in this standard size, which is called Oban, and about 100 prints in smaller formats, or something like that. And of course, he concentrated on the famous tourist attractions, the temples, the shrines, pagodas, outstanding landscape views. You will never see a factory in the design of an Hasui print. The so-called Susaku Hanga artists, that was another Japanese art movement, active at the same time like the Shinhanga art movement. Well, they had a different approach. They were more Western-oriented. They were more modern. There you can actually see factory buildings, yeah. But by Hasui or any other Shinhanga artist, never, never. And even when Hasui made town views, for instance, views of Tokyo, the print looks like the image. It's quiet, it's serene, it's romantic. Then Tokyo looks like a deserted little village. After World War II, Hasui had become famous also among his Japanese contemporaries. And in 1956, he received a very, very special honor by the Japanese government. He was named a living national treasure together with Ito Shinsui, his printmaking colleague, who also worked for Watanabe. They were the first to receive this honor, to be nominated, to be awarded with this title, Living National Treasure. Hasui died on November 7 in 1957 from cancer. He lied in hospital, and well, there you see his last print. It's called Hall of the Golden Ewe. You see here a priest climbing up the staircase. Hasui could not see his last print anymore, not the final print, but he supervised the production from his hospital bed. They gave him trial prints and he corrected them. And half a year after his death, Watanabe, the publisher, distributed this print among acquaintances and friends of the artist at the occasion of a memorial service which took place on March 6 in 1858, so roughly half a year after Hasui's death. And by the way, to be correct, this is not the original print from 1957, but this is a commemorative print which was printed, however, from the original blocks later, I think 1970 or something like this. Well, let's come to the end. Hasui Kawase, to wrap it up, one of the greatest artists of landscape printmaking in Japan, and I have to admit it, also one of my personal artists, one of my personal favorite artists. Well, this was a long video today. Well, thanks for your patience. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I would be happy to see you for our next video. And would also be happy if you could take a look at our auctions every now and then, www.artelino.com. Well, thank you. Have a good week and goodbye.